Welcome back to Our Canada, Our Future. We're talking with Ben Woodfinden, the Executive Director of Advocates for the Rule of Law, and we're talking about the role of the monarchy here in Canada. Ben, you've sort of outlined the role that the monarchy plays, but of course not everyone is very supportive of the monarchy. There are those who argue that we should just get rid of it, that it's outdated, that it's a relic. So I kind of wanted to touch on some of these objections and see what you have to say to them. I mean, the first is, why do we need it? You talk about it being symbolic. It's expensive. Why don't we just dump it? That's what do you say to that?
Well, first off on the cost point, right? Does the crown cost money? Sure, but you've got to ask the question: well, what if you replaced it with something? The chances are the thing that you would replace it with would probably be more expensive. Let's say we decided we wanted an elected head of state. We'd have to hold elections. Elections cost money. I've never thought argument is a serious one because it's not in the grand scale of things. It's not an expensive institution, and no matter what we replace it with, that's going to cost money. On your other point about why do we need it, I think you can make kind of a negative case for it, but also a positive case. So I'll try and make the positive case. Having this, so we have this governor general, and then this monarch, this king. Formally, they have an immense amount of power. They are the sovereign in our system. So on paper, if an alien was coming from another planet and just looked at our constitution, they would think that the king was immensely powerful. That he was, an all-powerful ruler to a certain extent. Of course, that's not how it works. Informally, the crown lacks any kind of real capacity to use that power. But it means that the democratic side of our government, so the parliament in our case, it means parliament is the one that exercises that informal power, but it exercises it on behalf of the crown. So again, this might sound kind of pointless, but where I think there's a real kind of small L liberal case for the monarchy here is precisely that what it does is by separating the head of government from the head of state, you deprive the most powerful person, the most powerful democratic figure in our system, so the prime minister and his government, you deprive them of the kind of symbolic power that would come with being the head of state, right? It's the crown that is supposed to personify the nation, this single person that represents all of us. The head of government is formally just His Majesty's chief advisor. So what this does is it ensures, in some subtle but important way, that our head of government cannot claim to be this kind of larger than life, potentially demagogic figure that speaks on behalf of everyone. So it's an accidental system. This system evolved over centuries in a kind of haphazard way. But I think there's a kind of accidental genius to the system that's absolutely worth preserving.
That's very interesting. I hadn't heard that argument, and I think it's very appealing. I wanted to ask too about, the specific monarchy, the British monarchy. There are some who argue that because of the historical wrongs that were committed, in the name of the crown, the role of the British Empire, the fact that there was colonialism, that these are reasons maybe, Canada is now an independent country, the monarchs don't live here. Is that a reason to maybe not question of having a monarchy, a constitutional monarchy, but the specific one that we have? Do you think that's a reasonable argument against it?
I don't think so either. I think we should take those concerns seriously, and the idea that the crown might be a kind of symbol of colonialism. I think that's an argument worth taking seriously and engaging with. But I don't ultimately buy it. And in many ways, so it's important to note in the Canadian context at least, that the various treaties that we have, that Canada has with Indigenous peoples, are treaties between the crown and these nations. So is the crown in some sense a symbol of colonialism? Sure. But in many ways, it's also the crown actually represents an important path, I think, to meaningful reconciliation, because it represents these treaties represent relationships between sovereign nations in a certain extent, right? Between the crown, between the sovereign, and between these other nations. People will disagree on this. I actually think that that's an important reminder to all Canadians that the Indigenous peoples, Indigenous nations are not just they do play a unique role in our country, and they should play a unique role in our country. They are nations often with their own laws and their own customs, and that we should recognize them as such. And so having these direct nation-to-nation, crown-to-indigenous relations, I actually think is an important kind of, again, a haphazard accidental recognition of this unique relationship we have with First Nations people.